They built a gate across the only road to my house and expected me to just accept it. They thought a metal fence, a keypad, and a little bit of neighborhood politics were enough to decide who belonged and who did not. What they did not know was that the road they were trying to control was something I had spent years helping build, and I had the documents to prove it. My name is Daniel Mercer. I am 54 years old, and for most of my adult life, I worked as a transportation engineer for the county. I never imagined that one day I would be standing outside my own neighborhood gate, waiting for a stranger to let me through. I bought my home on Willow Creek Drive 16 years ago. It was never a fancy place, but it was ours. A quiet street, old trees, families walking their dogs in the evening, kids riding bikes until their parents called them home. My wife, Emily, always joked that our street was the kind of place people moved to when they wanted to escape the noise of the world. And honestly, she was right. It was peaceful. That changed in 2022 when the Willow Creek Community Association elected a new board. The new president was a woman named Rebecca Sloan. Rebecca was smart, organized, and very confident, but she also had a habit of treating every disagreement like a battle she had to win. She liked rules, she liked control, and most of all, she liked being the person everyone had to ask for permission. A few months after taking over, the board announced a major security improvement project. They were installing a 12-foot iron gate at the entrance of our neighborhood with a digital access system. The price tag was nearly $45,000. At the meeting, Rebecca stood in front of everyone and explained that the gate would increase property values and keep the community safer. Most people clapped. Some people were excited. A few, including me, had questions. I raised my hand and asked a simple thing. I said, "Rebecca, before we spend that kind of money, has anyone verified whether the association actually owns the road?" The room went quiet for a second. Rebecca looked at me and smiled, but it was not a friendly smile. It was the kind of smile someone gives when they think they already know the answer, and they are enjoying making you feel like you do not. She said, "Daniel, this community has managed itself just fine without outside interference for years." I remember those words because they told me everything I needed to know. She was not answering the question. She was dismissing it. A few weeks later, the gate went up. Every homeowner received an access code except me. At first, I thought it was a mistake. Maybe my email got missed. Maybe someone forgot to add my address to the list. So I contacted the association office. The response came from Rebecca herself. She said my access was temporarily restricted while my account was under review. The problem was, my account was completely paid up. No one paid fees, no violations, no warnings, nothing. I called her and asked what exactly was being reviewed. She paused for a moment and said, "There are some concerns about your cooperation with the community." I almost laughed because it sounded like something from a movie. Cooperation. That was the word she used. What she really meant was that I had questioned her. I had not broken a rule. I had challenged her authority. And apparently, that was enough. The strange thing was, this did not come out of nowhere. Earlier that same year, Rebecca had approached me twice about buying my property. She told me the association was interested in expanding green space and improving the neighborhood layout, but the offers were far below market value. The first offer was low. The second one was even lower. When I declined, she acted like I had personally offended her. At the time, I thought it was just business. Looking back, I realized the gate was not about security. It was pressure. She wanted me frustrated. She wanted me tired. She wanted me to reach the point where selling seemed easier than fighting. The first night the gate was active. I drove home after picking up my 9-year-old son, Lucas, from soccer practice. It was already dark. I entered the code I had been given through my neighbor because I still had not received mine. Nothing happened. I tried again. Nothing. I sat there staring at that gate while my son looked out the window. Finally, I had to call my neighbor across the street and ask him to come open it for us. When he walked over, he looked embarrassed. He did not even know what to say. Neither did I. Lucas looked at me and asked, "Dad, why do we need someone else to open our street?" I looked at him in the mirror and gave the answer every parent gives when they are trying to protect their child from something ugly. I said, "It is probably just a mistake, buddy." But it was not a mistake. I knew that. That night, after Lucas went to sleep, I sat alone in my truck in the driveway and stared at the house I had worked so hard to build a life in. For the first time in 16 years, I wondered if leaving would be easier. Maybe I could sell. Maybe I could find somewhere else. Maybe I could stop fighting. But then I remembered something. I had spent 28 years studying roads, land records, and public access laws. I knew how neighborhoods were built. I knew how streets were dedicated. And deep down, I knew Rebecca had made one very serious mistake. She picked a fight over a road with the one person in the neighborhood who knew exactly where that road came from. The next morning, I stopped thinking like a frustrated homeowner and started thinking like an engineer again. That was the thing about my job. After almost 3 decades working with roads, you learn that everything has a paper trail. Every lane, every intersection, every piece of pavement has a history. Someone designed it, someone approved it, someone recorded it. Roads do not just appear because someone puts down asphalt and paints a line. There is always a story behind them. And I had a feeling the story behind Willow Creek Drive was not the one Rebecca wanted people to believe. I drove to the county records office with one goal in mind. I wanted to see the original subdivision documents. I wanted to know exactly who owned that road. The clerk behind the counter probably thought I was just another angry homeowner coming in with a complaint. She handed me a stack of old files and told me it might take some time. She was right, it took hours. But honestly, those hours felt different from the night before. The anger was still there, but now it had direction. I was not sitting in my driveway wondering if I should give up anymore. I was looking for answers. And eventually, I found what I was looking for, the original subdivision plat from 2004. I spread the documents across the table and immediately noticed something important. Willow Creek Drive was not private property. It was dedicated as a public right-of-way during the original development approval. The county had accepted responsibility for the roadway. The street was built with public infrastructure standards, connected to county-maintained roads, and listed as accessible to the public. In simple terms, the association could maintain landscaping, enforce neighborhood rules, and collect dues, but they did not own the road. They did not have the authority to put up a gate and decide who could enter. I remember sitting there looking at those documents and feeling two things at the same time. Relief, because I knew I was right, and frustration, because I realized Rebecca had probably counted on nobody checking. She was not fighting because she misunderstood the rules. She was fighting because she assumed nobody would challenge her. I made copies of everything and contacted the County Public Works Department. I also filed a formal complaint with the State Transportation Authority. I did not make threats. I did not yell. I simply provided the documents and asked one question. Does the Homeowners Association have legal authority to restrict access to this public right-of-way? The answer came faster than I expected. Within 2 weeks, a county inspector arrived at Willow Creek. I remember watching from my front porch as he walked around the gate, checked the access points, and reviewed the documents. Rebecca was outside almost immediately. She had a way of appearing whenever there was an audience. She walked over with a folder in her hand and that same confident expression she always wore at board meetings. She told the inspector that the gate was necessary because the neighborhood had become concerned about security. The inspector listened politely, then asked a very simple question. Who owns this roadway? Rebecca pointed toward the community entrance and said, "The association manages this area," the inspector replied. That was not my question. That moment was the first time I saw her confidence slip. Just for a second, but it was there. A week later, the county issued its official notice. The gate had to be removed within 30 days. If the association failed to comply, they would face daily penalties and the county could remove the structure themselves. Was the HOA responsible for all costs? When the notice arrived, Rebecca called an emergency board meeting. I attended because I wanted to hear what they planned to do. The room was tense. Some homeowners looked uncomfortable. Others looked angry, but not at me. They were angry because they had spent thousands of dollars on a project that was now becoming a legal problem. Rebecca stood at the front of the room and tried to control the conversation. She argued that even though the road was technically public, the neighborhood had treated it like a private entrance for years. She said the community needed to protect its investment. She said removing the gate would hurt property values. She said a lot of things, but none of them changed the documents. Finally, the county attorney, who had been invited to answer questions, spoke up. He looked around the room and said, "A road does not become private because people become comfortable pretending it is." Nobody said anything after that. It was one of those moments where everyone understood the argument was over. The countdown continued. Day after day, people drove past the gate knowing it was temporary. Rebecca still acted like she had another move. She told some residents she was working on a solution. She told others the county would eventually change its mind. But the county did not change its mind. The law did not change because someone was unhappy with it. On the 29th day, the crew arrived. I watched from a distance as workers disconnected the keypad, removed the metal panels, and loaded the pieces onto a truck. It was strange. That gate had caused so much tension, so many arguments, so much resentment, and then suddenly it was just a pile of steel sitting in the back of a vehicle. Something that had seemed so powerful was reduced to scrap. But the story was not finished. The county required the association to repair the damage caused by installing the gate. The pavement around the entrance had been altered, and the drainage area needed work. The HOA had a deadline, and finding a contractor on short notice was not easy. The only company available was one I had worked with during my years at the county. Some people later whispered that I must have arranged a favor or used my connections. I did not. They charged the association exactly what they charged everyone else. No discount, no special treatment. I had spent my career believing that rules mattered, and I was not going to abandon that principle just because I happened to be involved personally. A month after the gate came down, Rebecca resigned as HOA president. Officially, she said she wanted to focus on other priorities. Unofficially, everyone knew what happened. She had built her entire leadership style around control, and once people realized she never had that control to begin with, there was nothing left to hold on to. I thought that would be the end of it. I thought once the gate was gone, everything would go back to normal. But I learned something that nobody tells you about winning a fight in a neighborhood. The legal battle can end long before the emotional damage does. Because even though I got my road back, I was about to find out that some fences are invisible, and sometimes they are harder to tear down than metal ones. After the gate came down, I honestly thought the hardest part was over. I thought once the metal was gone, once the county had made its decision clear, once Rebecca stepped away from the HOA board, everything would slowly return to normal. I believed people would look back and realize this was never about winning or losing. It was about doing things the right way. But I learned something about neighborhood fights that nobody really talks about. The legal victory is usually the easiest part. The harder part is what happens when everyone has to keep living next door after the argument is over. Because a court decision can remove a gate made of steel, but it cannot immediately remove the invisible walls people build between each other. In the weeks after the gate was removed, Willow Creek felt different. The street looked exactly the same. The trees were still there. The houses were still there. People still walked their dogs in the evening. But something had changed. There was a quietness that was not there before. The kind of quiet where people are saying something without actually saying anything. Neighbors who used to stop and talk with me at the mailbox suddenly became busy when I walked outside. A few people who had supported Rebecca during the whole process avoided eye contact. They never apologized. They never asked questions. They simply moved on as if pretending nothing happened would make the tension disappear. My wife, Emily, noticed it too. One night while we were sitting on the back porch, she looked over at me and said, "You know, I think some people are more upset that they were wrong than they are about what actually happened." I thought about that for a long time because she was probably right. Sometimes people do not get angry because you hurt them. Sometimes they get angry because your actions force them to admit they trusted the wrong person. And admitting that is not easy. The part that hurt the most was not the neighbors ignoring me. I could handle that. I had dealt with angry people before. I had spent years in public meetings where engineers, politicians, and residents all disagreed loudly. The part that really stayed with me was what happened with my son, Lucas. Before all of this, Lucas and the boy next door were inseparable. They rode bikes together, played basketball in the driveway, and spent summer afternoons running between our houses like they owned the whole street. To them, the neighborhood was simple. There were no board members, no legal documents, no arguments about public access. They were just kids being kids. But after the gate situation, things changed. The other family became distant. Invitations stopped coming. The kids slowly stopped playing together. One afternoon, Lucas came inside holding his basketball and asked me, "Dad, did I do something wrong?" That question hit me harder than any argument I had with Rebecca, because he thought he was the problem. He thought somehow the adults being angry had something to do with him. I sat down with him and told him the truth in a way a 9-year-old could understand. I told him that sometimes adults disagree, and sometimes people make choices that affect others. But none of that was his fault. He nodded, but I could tell he still did not fully understand. Honestly, neither did I. I was a grown man with decades of experience, and even I struggled to understand how a neighborhood could become divided over a gate. Months passed. Life moved forward. The HOA repaired the entrance. New board members were elected. The community tried to rebuild. Some people eventually started talking to us again. Others never did. And I accepted that. I realized that not every broken relationship gets repaired just because the argument is over. Some people need someone to blame because accepting the truth means accepting their own role in what happened. Every once in a while, I still drive past the entrance to Willow Creek and look at the empty space where that gate used to be. There are no signs now, no keypad, no barrier, just a normal road connecting one neighborhood to another. And every time I see it, I remember the first night I sat outside that gate with my son in the back seat. I remember the feeling of confusion more than anger, the strange feeling of being treated like a stranger in the place where I had built my life. That memory never really left me, but neither did the lesson. For years, I worked with roads. I studied how communities connect. I learned that a road is not just pavement. It is access. It is opportunity. It is the thing that allows people to move freely from one place to another. And maybe that is why the situation bothered me so much. Because Rebecca was not just trying to control a piece of property. She was trying to control who had the right to belong. She believed having the authority to hold the key meant she had the power. But she misunderstood something important. Real authority does not come from making people dependent on you. It comes from earning their trust. The moment people realized that gate was built on a false assumption, the power disappeared. The expensive iron structure that was supposed to represent security became a symbol of something else entirely. It became a reminder of what happens when people confuse leadership with control. Looking back now, I still do not see myself as some kind of hero. I did not want to fight. I did not want attention. I did not want neighbors taking sides. I wanted to come home without needing permission. I wanted my son to understand that his home was still his home. And maybe that is the simplest way to explain everything. I was not fighting for a gate to come down. I was fighting against the idea that someone could take away something they never owned in the first place. Rebecca wanted me to believe that leaving would be easier. She wanted frustration to do the work for her. She thought eventually I would get tired and sell. But she underestimated one thing. Sometimes the person who refuses to walk away is not looking for a fight. Sometimes they are simply protecting something that matters. A home, a principle, a promise they made to themselves. Today, when I drive down that road, I do not think about Rebecca anymore. I think about the lesson. I think about how important it is to question things, even when everyone else seems comfortable accepting them. Because history has shown us that a lot of problems continue simply because nobody wants to be the first person to ask, are we actually allowed to do this? So I want to hear what you think. If you were in my situation, would you have fought back like I did, knowing it could damage relationships with your neighbors? Or would you have decided that peace was worth more than proving you were right? Do you think Rebecca was trying to protect the community? Or did she cross the line by using her position to pressure someone into leaving? Share your opinion in the comments because these stories are never just about a gate. They are about power, trust, property, and what happens when ordinary people are forced to stand up against a system they believe has gone too far. If you enjoy real-life stories about people fighting for fairness and holding powerful neighbors accountable, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share the story with someone who believes that doing the right thing still matters. Because sometimes the biggest battles are not fought inside a courtroom. Sometimes they happen on a quiet street, in front of your own home, at a gate someone never had the right to close.